mom's sister. So my mom lived there.
Okay.
She did see her birth parents on and off, and she liked the life there. She always said it was a good life at the, until the turmoil started. So I don't know if you have any questions. You want me to continue?
Oh yeah, no, don't worry. The thing I'm telling you is that we are not live still in Facebook. In 5 minutes, I'm going to stream it live. So I'm going to ask you from the first question. I'm sorry if I didn't explain well. So yeah, I'll be asking you from the first one. I told you, yeah, where was where she was born and all thing. But yeah, for now, just relax. We have 5 minutes, and in 5 minutes
Okay.
we'll
No problem.
yeah,
No
in five
problem.
minutes we will be starting.
I don't. Um, although I've never denied my background, my whatever, or my family's background. It wasn't something that defined us or our family either. So
Mm, yeah. Well, I think you know why I'm doing this, right? Because you read that, yeah, we discovered in my family that my great grandfather, he was from Poland, and he had nine. Well, all were like nine siblings, and yeah, my grandfather, and two of his brothers, they went no, they moved to Mexico before the war, so they were saved of the war. But yeah, the other siblings, we don't know like for sure, but almost everyone, they were killed, yeah, because they were Jewish, and they were killed by the Nazis. But one of his sisters, he survived 4 concentration camps. Actually,
really,
she was also in Auschwitz for a while, but yeah, she
really,
was. So that was a miracle, right? And then they could bring her to Mexico, and she lived her life here, right? By the way, that photo is of my great
the
grandfather.
picture.
Yeah, he's. But yes, that's why I'm doing this. We don't know much about her. For example, I'm going to do a live of me talking about my family, maybe in 2 weeks or something. But yeah, we know that she was in Auschwitz and all the names of the camps, for example, but she never talked about her experiences. We just know, like, I don't know, one or two, because she told them to her, I think it was her niece. But yes, it's so difficult, right? Because obviously they didn't want to tell what happened. It was so
I
traumatic
can
for
I
them.
I can see that it's personal to you, for
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Yes, but yeah, for example, my great grandfather, he didn't tell anyone like about his family in Poland. My grandmother, she didn't know that he had all that brothers and sisters there. And yeah, because he didn't want to talk about it, and to people know that they were Jewish or something, because all the things that were happening in that time. Okay, I think in 3 minutes I will post the interview. um, After that, you can share it on your Facebook if you want someone to watch your this interview. I don't know, a
Okay.
friend, family,
No,
or
no, but I
something.
have. I don't know if you're going to be asking the same questions that you sent me, or is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
I'm going to
No
ask you
problem. I just wanted to.
the questions that I sent you. So okay, we have 2 minutes. I'm getting all this ready.
Okay. No problem.
So
No problem. Okay.
Okay. I will tell you when we are live, because yeah, in 1 minute I will hit the button of post it on the page. So yeah. Are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Yeah, wait a minute, just a minute. Okay, I think I'm going to post it right now. Okay, so we are live. Hello to everybody. I don't know
Hello.
if there's someone like that it's connecting to this stream, but hello to everyone in all the world. I don't know where are you connecting to this stream, but welcome. And I'm here with Lenore Plafker. She's a daughter of a survivor from Auschwitz, and I'll be asking her about her survival story. So don't go off this stream so you can learn about this amazing story of survival, so we can think and value more the life that we have, and to know that we all have that strength to face these adversities. Hello, Lenore, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
I'm the one that's honored to tell my mother's story.
Yeah, I think she's proud of you, right? She will be proud of you, and it's so brave of you to tell her story, so it will never be forgotten, because this is a story that deserves to be told, right?
Yes, definitely. And I made a promise to my mother that I would make sure that her story was not forgotten.
Yeah, yeah, that should be. So thank you for being here, and I'll be asking you these questions about her. The first question is, where was your mother from, and what was her name?
My mother's name at birth, I'm not really sure. I believe they called her Sora at home. Her papers show in later years as she was trying to come over and to Canada and after the war, it showed her name as Charlotte. Here, she was always known to us as Charlotte. Her maiden name, she was born as SLOMOWITZ. She was born in 1928. She was born in Košice, which is a small place at the time in Czechoslovakia, later taken over by the Hungarians just as the war started in Europe, and obviously on behalf of the Germans. Now it's
Oh
part of
yeah, all
it's
the
part of the
time.
Ukraine.
Yeah, oh yeah, now that's Ukraine, right?
I'm sorry.
Oh, that nowadays that part of the world is Ukraine, right? You said that.
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's so interesting because yeah, borders were moving right back and forth between countries, so it was like a little bit confusing, but yeah, now so it's Ukraine. Okay, thank you. And can you tell us like a summary about her survival story, or yeah, if you know how she was taken from her home and all that she went through?
She went through a lot during the war, after the war as well. She was born in Košice, as I said. She somehow was separated from her birth parents, Abraham and Syria. I don't really know why, and I don't even know if my mother knew actually why. She went eventually to live in Lochovo, which wasn't far, and had family there. Whether real or foster, I'm still not sure. I believe through the years I found out they were a real family, cousins. She had uh, a step aunt, she had a step uncle or a real aunt and uncle, whatever. I'm not really sure, and I'm still trying to actually find out. And I think my mother had her suspicions as well. Uh, she was basically brought up by her grandmother, who she adored and who adored her, as well as her sister. My mom had a younger sister. And her life there was fine. She always used to tell me that it was so much better than living here with the materialism and with all the stress and all of that. She was fine. She went to a Ukrainian school, actually, and unfortunately, she had to stop school because they would not allow Jewish children to continue in
Yeah.
school. And that was something that really upset my mother because education was important for her. So she stopped at about grade 7. And then things were went on relatively well, like anywhere where you're growing up. And in the men were sent to work camps earlier on when the war started in Europe. And then in 1944, when the Hungarians were in charge, they came and they told my mother and her family to get ready, that they were going to be leaving in an hour. Wow. And to pack up just the essentials of what they needed, which is basically what they did. They, I guess, personal things. They left whatever they had in terms of possessions. They left. My mother's family had a store. They ran a store, a general store at the time. They had the house and the store, the property was attached. They had everything in the house in terms of whatever you would think possession. And they left, but they had to leave. They had no choice. So my mother left. The men weren't there. The men were in work camps. So my mother left with her sister, her grandmother. She had a step aunt, and they rounded them all up and they took them to a ghetto in Moncton, which was the, I guess, neighboring biggest city over there. And they stayed there. I'm not really sure how long they were in that ghetto for. My mother never said. But then they finally rounded them all up in cattle cars and took them to Auschwitz. My mother, directly to Auschwitz. My mother went with her sister, younger sister, who I'm also named after, and her best friend at the time. And they landed up at the gates of Auschwitz. When they got there, they didn't really know. They didn't know where they were going, so they didn't know what was going on there at the time when they got there. They lined up like everybody else. And when they got to the front of the line, somehow a guard. My mother looked older than her age. She would have been 15, almost 16 at the time. Because this, I believe, they took them in September. So my mother looked older than her age, and the guard, although she had these two younger children attacked, that she was holding on to, the guard told her that when they ask you how old you are, lie about your age. They'll believe you.
Wow.
Because you look older.
That guard helped her, right?
Yes, and she did. And they told my mother, okay, you go in this direction. Left and right. They sent her sister, who was younger than her, and her best friend, who was younger than her. That's the last time she saw them. And as she came out, she was saying, when am I going to see my family again? And they pointed up to the sky, and there was a lot of smoke and smell. And they told her, they pointed up and they said, that's where your family is. That's where they're going to be. And that's when it started, basically.
That's so
Now,
terrible.
I know my mother was in Auschwitz for a year, luckier maybe than others, because others were there, others stayed there much longer.
Yeah.
She was there, I know she worked on, carrying stones, lifting stones. She worked with the potatoes, in get in, taking them, getting them. They were peeled, and that's what they used as food. They used a very meager potato soup, what they call potato soup, and a slice of bread, and that was their food.
Yeah.
And as my mother worked through the time she was there, if she or anybody was caught taking an extra piece of bread, if they worked in the kitchen or they worked there, if they were caught taking an extra piece of bread or an extra potato, either for themselves or to give to somebody who was sick or who, they would be shot immediately. So I know that was there. And at some point, my mother landed, I don't know if it was intentional, she landed in a group of Catholic children with, they called them couples, which was the woman, the house mother, the woman that ran that home for them.
Mm.
And she started talking to them, and she told them that she's a Catholic girl, Catholic child. And my mother in school, she had seen how they do the blessings and, the prayers and all of that. So she did that. But they didn't believe her. And the capo, or the mother, the house mother, uh, uh, beat her up, broke her nose, and threw her out. That's what I know. I mean, I don't really know, and I don't know individual stories of what happened. Her encounters, I'm sure she had many encounters with different people while she was at Auschwitz, but that I don't know.
But do you
She,
know why
I
she?
know, I'm sorry?
But do you know why did she try to convince that kids did they had like some privileges, or you don't know?
Why she did that? Why she did that, you mean? Because
Privileges or?
I guess she thought that there would be a
Mhm.
chance of
Yeah.
me. I don't really know these particular children, what they were together for. Maybe they were orphans, they had lost their parents, maybe, I'm not really sure. But I would assume that my mother thought she would be better treated. She would get more food,
Okay.
but it didn't work out that way. And she just continued on, I guess, until, she lost an enormous amount of weight. Uh, and I know she slept on straw. They all slept on straw, and they were very closely together. There, my mother told me there was no toothpaste, so they brushed their teeth with salt.
Wow.
That's what they used. And eventually, as the war continued on, this was in 1944 when my mother was in Auschwitz. As the war continued on, um, they the Germans eventually realized that the Allies were gaining on them and were approaching quite quickly. So all those that they were able to, they gathered them up and they forced them to go on what became known as the Death March. They marched to Ravensbrück, which was another camp, which was further, I guess, further away. And they made them all march with no clothes and no coats, very little clothing, light clothing, no shoes, boots, torn shoes, all of that. Sick, some of them sick, weak, obviously, because they had all lost a lot of weight. And this was in the winter. And my mother went, she had no choice. How she did it, I don't know. From her strength, from her courage. They, like a lot of the others, she walked. And along the way, because of the weather and the condition they were in, uh, she eventually lost a toe because of that. And at some point, the Germans realized that they couldn't continue to do what they were doing because the Allies were getting too close. So they sent them, they marched them, they thought they would be able to march them back to Auschwitz. Now, I don't know how many of them landed up back at Auschwitz after, made it, but I know that if you didn't march, and if you talked, if you were, along the march, you were immediately shot also. And somehow my mother made it back. And the next day, it seems as if all the Germans had just taken off because they knew the Allies were coming.
Yeah.
And then the day after, the Russians came to liberate them. And they did, but along the way, everybody, I mean, they were just sick people, dying people, from what my mother told me, everywhere. And the Russians, whenever they could find or see a young girl, young woman, the Russian soldiers just proceeded to rape them as much as they could. And my mother saw what was going on, and quick thinking. And she was not a dumb woman, even though she had very minimal education. She immediately lied to all the Russian soldiers and told them how sick she was. They better, stay away, stay away. They did, somehow.
Yeah,
And
wow.
when
I
they
think that saved her. Yeah.
they gave them some food. A lot of them just couldn't survive eating because they were just too sick, or they were, too malnourished to be able to keep any of the nutrients or any of the food. So they eventually, the Red Cross came in and took them to clinics. They were checked out, and my mother was in a DP camp, a displaced persons camp in Germany, I believe in Germany, called Feldafing. She stayed there for a while, but she tried to contact the Red Cross at the beginning to see if she could find any of her family, but she couldn't. And they found eventually that she had typhus, which is a form of TB or close to TB, something like that. And she was sent to a sanatorium to recover eventually. And she did. She gained her strength back. She was released. And I guess she had made some friends there or after, and they tried to go back. But at the time, it already was taken over by the Russian communist government. It was all communist, and they told my mother, the people that she met along, they tried to go through borders to hide from country to country to try to go back, but there was nothing to go back to in any case. So my mother eventually, she worked for part of the time with the resistance and the whatever, the partisans, and then eventually she, by the Red Cross, she made her way to an org school and home for girls. And that was her savior. She went there, she stayed there, they were clothed, fed as much as they could, and they were learning trades. My mother learned dressmaking and pattern making. That was her trade, which she did for a long time. And she said to me that what she really wanted to do was to become I don't know why, was to become an X-ray technician. That's what she really wanted to do. But this, she knew she had to do something practical. So
Yeah.
this is what she did. And she said she didn't like it, but she practiced it after. She was good at it. And she was known for that for many, many years for what she did. And many times she said it was the best time in her life to be there in the Ord House in Switzerland. It was in Basel, in Switzerland.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
she stayed there. She made friends. She listened to American music. Uh, she came and she came to hear about Canada. And at a certain point, once everything was finished there, they couldn't stay there indefinitely.
Yeah.
So they had to make plans. And her plan was that she wanted to go to Canada.
Mm. I will show the photo of her with her friends, so maybe you can, I don't know, just explain.
That, yes, I believe that probably was with two of the other girls that were in the home in Switzerland. That's what I think, and that's what I remember my mother telling me. Now I have pictures. I had other pictures where she was with other people uh, after, where I believe these people were the ones she was trying to cross the borders and countries with, countries with. But I had tried to give those pictures to the Holocaust Museum here in Montreal. But she stayed there, made friends, lived, probably did a lot of the things that young girls would do. I would say she probably stayed there because she was 17, about 17 uh, when she started. And at some point, as I said before, they had to make a life and decide what they were going to do. And with the Jewish Agency and the Red Cross, she decided she wanted to go to Canada. And I guess they had a lot of people coming into the school, the home, etc., etc. And she had befriended a couple that were of Jehovah's Witness. Not that my mother really probably understood a lot of what it particularly meant, but she knew it wasn't Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
And as she said, she befriended them and they wanted to sponsor her to come across to Canada. And she agreed, but in her mind, she said that I'm not going to deny that I'm Jewish or turn into something else or become something else after everything my family went through and everything I went through. She came from a religious background herself, although many years after, uh, although when she came here, she wanted to continue for whatever reasons. She didn't, but she agreed to be sponsored by this couple, and arrangements were made. And I know that I had all the documents. She came over eventually on in 51 on a ship called the SS Nelly.
Yes, I think I have here the
That's right.
documents.
That's
Yes.
right. Exactly.
This
Those
one.
were her identification papers. She has her work papers. That was my mother at the time. And then she has her boarding paper to authorizing her to be on the boat. Everything was in order when she came across. Now the that's it. Stamps. You can see that there are multiple stamps, multiple checkpoints, crossing, etc. And it wasn't a very pleasant passage because the passengers that came for this reason and this way uh, did not have staterooms up on top. And I don't even know if they were on that particular ship that voyage, but they were in, I guess, what you would call steerage, in that they were in the bottom of the ship. And it was horrible. People were getting seasick and sick also again from it. But eventually it landed, and my mother had to board a train when it landed in Canada on the coast. And she was supposed to meet this couple, I believe in St. John's, I think, but she never did. She decided she wasn't going to. She had a friend in Montreal who had come here before her, very good friend. And she decided she was going to get off in Montreal and be with her friend and make a life for her there. She had very, very little money landing. I think the Jewish agency at the time gave them they paid for their passage and everything, but they gave them very, very little money to live on after. And eventually, when my mother came, she met up with her friend. She met her friend, and they decided that they would share. Eventually, that they would share an apartment together, and they did. And I believe her friend was working in a bakery, and my mother got a job there eventually too. She tried to, do a few things. They came in this, I think she came in the spring. It was the spring here. So eventually she worked in the bakery. It was a very ethnic area at the time here in Montreal, and she worked, and eventually she met my father at the bakery, my father coming in to buy things. My father's family, Jewish, but they weren't survivors. The ancestors probably were, but I believe they came over before from Europe, before the war. And my father was Jewish, blonde and blue-eyed. So my mother never believed he was Jewish until he took her home to meet his family. And he did, and they met. You know the story, like many, where they fell in love, and they got married. They went out and they got married. As a matter of fact, if you can see it, I'm holding up the picture, the wedding picture.
Oh, that's
Can you see
nice.
it properly?
Yes.
That's my mother and father, and that's my paternal grandmother, my father's mother. That was at their wedding. Sorry, that they had. And, you know, they made a life. That was what was most important to my mother. It kept her going during her time at Auschwitz. She wanted a family, and she wanted to restart a family and remake a family.
She was so strong, right? And thank God she could survive and then come here to America and have a family, and that's amazing. But I wanted to ask you, did she ever say what was her motivation of surviving? Because she knew that she lost her sister, her family, her best friend. Like, where was her faith coming from?
I'm sorry, where was
her faith coming from? Like, why did she wanted to survive? The motivation
well,
of
she
her.
wanted to survive because she had a very strong belief and determination that she wanted to restart a family. She wanted to restart a family to show her strength, to show the strength of the Jewish people. And she believed very much every time a young couple had children, if there was somebody pregnant, born, she would always say how good it was and how happy she was that there would be more, that the Jewish people would keep increasing or keep, to her, that was the proof of the spirit. And she, my mother was a very practical person, but she also was a person that believed very much that it's going to be better, that tomorrow is always another day. She believed that life was like that it went up and down. So today you might have, a very bumpy road, but then it'll get better and it'll get bumpy again. That's how she believed life was, and her faith in people.
Wow,
And
yeah.
it was very important to her to keep on.
Yeah, it's incredible, right? Because yeah, in the midst of that terrible situation, she was like hoping to have a family, you know. That's the like the motivation she had for surviving,
Yeah.
and I think that's awesome. I'm so happy that she could do that, right? Because you are here with us now, so yeah, that's amazing. And I wanted also to ask you that if you think that yeah, Russians liberate her, right? The Auschwitz, that camp. But yeah, you told us that they were terrible, right? They were raping all these girls. So do you think they were heroes for true? Like, what do you think about that?
Well, I think personally, I believe that each and every one was a hero, whether they survived or whether they didn't. Um, I know that um, my mother would say to young people today, your generation, that they must pass on the stories of what happened through my generation, but we're not going to be here either for, a lot of the second generation is also getting older and getting, they're for sure, the survivors themselves are very limited now. And the next generation is really the one that has to be instilled with the desire to know the stories and to tell the stories and to pass it on. Um, not not just individual stories or any of that, but to pass on the lessons of what's learned from those stories.
Yeah,
My mother was a survivor, but yet she never, there were people that did, but she never became bitter after. She was
yeah,
not a bitter person. And she was not the type of person. She believed and she thought the lessons of the Holocaust were that we should not be, we should not be restricted in our thinking of people. A person is a person, whether they're, you know, you should be tolerant of all people and and not, you know, not feel that they don't have the right to exist or to practice their faith or to believe in what they believe. She wouldn't take a whole group of people and put the burden of what happened in history on them. Uh, she never blamed German people, Hungarian people, whatever, for anything. She was friends with many different types of people through what she did in life, and she later years, uh, once we had gone through school, and we were older in school and everything already. I don't remember how old I was. I know I was still living. I know I was still living with my parents, so I must have been in my late teens probably. My mother went out to work finally. She had worked at home for many, many years while we were young, growing up. But then she went out to work, and there she met people, and she was proud of what she was learning. She was learning different skills, etc., etc. She took a course to learn the French language, all of these things. And she would do what she needed to do in order to make make a life. My father did not come from a rich family. And they worked. They worked when they got married. They, they built up a home. They worked hard and they made a life for us. And my mother contributed to that. She worked alongside my father with my father, and that was how they did it. That was how they built it up. And in later years, my mother joined a group for survivors.
Mm.
And they celebrated holidays. It was a social group as well as a group that honored and told stories of the survivors. And there is Yom HaShoah Day, which is a commemorative for the Holocaust. And for many of the years that my mother was there, they had a commemoration every year. And my mother participated. She was either there or actually participated in the ceremony itself, or she was in the audience. And I went with her for every year that she could go. I was right there beside her, and there were years where I was beside my mother actually lighting candles in memory of those that didn't survive. And my mother speaking at various occasions through that group or whatever on behalf of that. As a matter of fact, I have a picture here. I don't know. Can you see it? This is my mother at a podium.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can see it. Okay, I will put it like in big. Yeah. Oh yeah, she's talking. Yeah.
My mother at the podium, and it meant a lot to her to be in that group. Actually, it was important to her. At later years, she had to unfortunately stop going because in her elder years she had developed dementia and Alzheimer's. And unfortunately, at the beginning of it, I think that she was a very proud person, private person, and I think just the fact that she had changed and she was different, she didn't like people to see that at that time. And while she could, she did speak. And during those times, I always told her that I would make sure that her story would not be forgotten. And one thing that my mother had for many, many years was a nightmare because of what she had gone through. The nightmare basically surrounded around the fact that she could not find her way home. She didn't know where she was. She was lost, and she couldn't get back to somewhere she knew. Many, many years she had that, as well as physical issues, because of which stayed for most of her life due to her typhus, and also due to her beatings and stuff like that. In later years, she was lucky. She lived to see a family again. Myself and I have one brother. My brother has 2 children, so those were her grandchildren. Those are her grandchildren, were her grandchildren. And through the years, her family was everything to her, the most important thing in her life. She doted on her family constantly. She was lucky to see a great-grandson born. And while my mother was sick with Alzheimer's, dementia, and we would still continue to show her pictures of her family. Her great-grandson, who was born while she was in a care facility, she saw him because they brought her to visit, but he was the only one she could pick out of a group of people in the pictures. Always. She might get mixed up with other things, but she could always pick him out. It was really, family was something very important and very special to her. She always said that she lost her family, she didn't have her family, But when she got married, my father's family became her family.
Wow, yeah, that's so nice, right? And that she could also knew her great grandson. So yeah, and I wanted to ask you, at what age did your mom told you about what happened to her, and how was it like that experience of you knowing that?
You know, I don't remember a specific age or exactly. At the beginning, I know she didn't really talk about it, although I knew, I think I knew from a fairly young age that she was a survivor. I knew that. Um, and I knew it because I felt different. I felt different than other kids around me to a certain extent. But I didn't have a large extended family like they might have. Uh, and one thing that stays in the mind of second generation to survivors is that they always want to make their life, they always want to make the life of the survivor better. They always want to do things to please, to help, to try to make it right. Although you obviously can't always do that. That's something that's different. And in later years, I guess I started to learn more of the specifics, and my mother would mention them. And she, a couple of times through the group that she was involved with, she was part of a book that told stories of 10 survivors in the group. She was one of the 10 that they had interviewed. She told her story a couple of times, uh, to multi-generational
Yeah,
groups and things
but
like that.
did she ever tell you like personally to you and your brother like, okay, yeah, I went through this, or you just heard her story of a interview she had?
Well, once I remember specifically, although I was there in the house, I stayed in the next room while she told the story. Uh, this one particular time. But I knew a lot. I knew a lot of it already by this time. I was probably well in my, I don't know, 30s or 40s, probably. Maybe even a little, no, that's probably in my 40s. Um, and I mean, she never hid it. My mother never hid it, but she never went around saying, you know what happened to me? And start talking and telling everybody. I don't know, maybe it's because my dad wasn't a survivor. She had a lot of survivor friends, but she had a lot of other friends as well that weren't. So, it didn't define her for the rest of her life after,
Yeah.
but it was and it became even more important to her later on, which I think is like with a lot of survivors when they're younger, they're busy building a life and they're busy raising a family. Later, later as their children, leave the nest, they have more time to think about the past and what happened to them. But her, I think if she would speak to, if she would speak today to, the third generation, et cetera, you know, she would tell them to be vigilant, that it doesn't take much. And it's not just Jews, and it's not, there are many, many, unfortunately, incidents in history and around the world. And she said that's why it's not only for you. You have to be empathetic, and you have to realize that we can all we can all have something like this happen
Yeah.
in our country, and that's why.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should be, yeah, more empathetic, as she said, right? Because that's why we have all this, yeah, all this horrible stuff in wars and violence, all this stuff in the world. But yeah, I think that's a such a valuable lesson to be empathetic. And as she said, life it has like highs and lows, right? And you have to
That's
have
right.
like that hope that everything is going to be better. So yeah, you can move on. And yes, yeah, I have this other question for you that is, what would you say to my generation about the importance of knowing your family roots?
I think it's extremely important. And I think no matter what they are, it's very important. And I see that as you get older, it becomes even more important. I'm not sure what my mother's first years and formative years really were like or what happened. I know I'd like to know. I made some efforts to try to find out. Uh, but that's fine. That's okay. I understand that I understand that. But it's extremely important to know your family and to appreciate them no matter what they are. It's part of
Yeah.
what makes you who
Yeah,
you
and
are.
knowing your family roots, you can understand, right? Why you have this family, how you become the person you are now, right? Because all our ancestors, they had something with this, obviously, because yeah, if they weren't live, we weren't being here, right? So yeah, it's so important to know the roots, and maybe for some people it's, yeah, like painful, right? But yeah, I think it's important for us, yeah, for my generation, because we most of the times my generation just knows that, okay, yeah, my grandparents names and my great grandparents, but they don't know like the story
That's it.
of them, right? So yeah, I think it's so important. And yeah, the last question I want to ask you is that, what does it mean never again for you, and what are you doing about it?
I myself personally, uh, besides being with my mother at these various commemorations, and going even now that she's not alive, I go to them. Um, for me, I as I volunteered through my 40s, 50s, whatever, I've been involved with a couple of projects actually. One is with young children, where we try to sensitize them to what the number 6 million might possibly mean, and that 6 million people were lost. 6 million Jews and other people were lost. I did that, and I also did a program with older students, probably in about grade, I think maybe 6 and up, where we both in Jewish private schools here and in public schools to tell them um, facts of what happened in the Holocaust with the help of educational materials. It's a program that's called David's Story. It's a fictional program, but it recounts what actually happened. I did that for a while. To me personally, what never again means is basically touching on what I said before, that you have to be sensitive and you have to realize that it's not just yourself. It's other people that need to you have to be compassionate towards, which my mother was extremely compassionate to people that were in trouble, to people, you have to uh, realize that there's all kinds of people in the world to be that, and that you have to be tolerant to other people, to other groups, and not just think, because if you are tolerant to other groups, you really reduce the chance of these type of things happening in the world and eventually happening to your own community and your own world. And never again,
Yes.
it's something that you have to make a conscious effort at, and the world has to make a conscious effort at. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, yeah, as you said, that you volunteer for years, I think never again. It's trying to like to tell these stories to younger generations. That's for you, right? Because
Exactly,
you
exactly. You know,
Yeah, so
that's what's extremely important,
yeah.
because there has to be a constant passing down of the information. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
going to happen in the world eventually, but that's what has to happen.
Yeah, so it's so important, right, to give these stories to the future generations so they will never forget and this will never happen again. So
That's right.
yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to show I think this is the picture with your mom when she was older, and yeah, so
Yeah.
I think this is a nice photo, because it shows us that she had a long-lasting life. Thank God she could get to this age, and she was happy, right, with you and all this, and yeah, we are so
Uh,
happy to hear her story by you.
my mother was in a nursing home already at that time, and not so much then because she was still uh, a lot she was more self-sufficient, but towards the end, every time um, people would the caregivers would come close to her. She uh, didn't like it if they would be too close or touch her, or those type of things. She would uh, it would bring back, I think, a lot of the feelings that she had, and also she was worried at probably around the time she was of this photo when she was in the nursing home. She she was worried that she wouldn't have a place to live. She was worried where her possessions were, uh, things like that. And she would,
Yeah.
she had to be reassured, and she had to be reassured that things were okay, they would be okay, that she wouldn't be thrown out of where she was, that type of thing.
Yes, but yeah, the good thing is that she was happy, right? She seems happy, and thank to you that you are here telling her story.
It,
And just for ending this interview, I wanted to also put here the design I made for this interview. And yeah, I put pretending saved my life, because your mother, she pretended to be older, and then she pretended to be sick, and then she pretended to be to getting to these Jehovah Witnesses, and pretending saved her life. And I just wanted to read this little poem I wrote for her for ending this interview. So yeah, I wrote, she was so young, she lost everything. She was strong, but treated as nothing. Her adult face, the key that saved her brave heart, and faith that beat them. So thank you, Lenore, for being here, for telling this story that deserves to be told. And I know she's very proud of you right now. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for your time.
I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope everyone enjoyed this interview. That yeah, maybe these are like difficult stories to hear, but they are deserved to be told, and we can learn that there is hope through difficult circumstances, and that we should value our lives. And as Lenore said, that we should be empathetic and learn from this experience. So thank you so much, everyone that is watching, and thank you, Lenore.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I
Bye.
want to compliment you on the work that you're doing. Thank you.
No, thank you.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. You're welcome.